Welcome to Code the Future. Today we're joined by a true pioneer at the intersection of speed, self-driving tech, and storytelling, or what he likes to call narrative command. Alex Roy. You might know him as the record-breaking Cannonball Run driver, but Alex has also been a longtime visionary of the autonomous mobility space, a sharp critic of tech hype, and one of the co-hosts and founder of the popular Autonocast podcasts. From tearing across America to tearing down myths about AI and automation, Alex is one of these guys who sees the road ahead before the rest of us even know there's a turn coming. So Alex, welcome to the show. Let's dive in.
Thank you for that lovely, lovely intro.
So I know I kind of breezed over your biography. You've obviously got an illustrious history. Maybe you can sort of fill in some of those gaps for our listeners and viewers. Tell us a little bit more about your claim to fame within the industry. And then I want to touch more on that narrative command point.
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess my claim to fame remains 17 years later, breaking the Cannonball Run record. But the connection to autonomy and transportation was that, at the time, it's 2005, 6, 7, we, we were using like the cutting edge of mapping, the first versions of Google Earth that had just been made public, radar detection, laser jammers, just everything you could put in a car that would make it possible to drive cross country without getting caught, we put it in it. And so, when I had Letterman and I wrote a book about it, and as soon as it came out in 2008, I realized that all these folks who were doing the DARPA challenge, who were like really the pioneers of autonomy, were fans of my book. And so I got invited out to see some of what they were doing and began angel investing in the sector. And so 10 years later, having launched the Autonocast podcast, I wrote a column about the fatal crash in Tempe, Arizona, the Uber ATG vehicle that killed Elaine Hertzberg,
Right.
speculating on what had gone wrong at Uber ATG. And the next thing I knew, I was being recruited by Uber to become part of the team. I turned them down and I went to Argo AI. So that's my circuitous route to the autonomy business.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Lots of familiar dates and names, in that obviously. But I want to touch on the narrative command element because obviously this has sort of become one of your mantras within the space, as a VC or whatnot. We're obviously a player within the software-defined vehicle space. So I want to get a sense from you. Maybe you can define, what exactly is narrative command, and when you think about software-defined vehicles and how they've sort of play tangentially in relation to autonomous vehicles. Is there a company out there that you think, is dominant in that narrative command sector? Is it a tier one? Is it an OEM? What's your sense?
Narrative command is the purposeful accumulation of perceived inevitability, which is, as a concept, lives above. It's the best case scenario output of marketing and communications. And very few companies get this right. And it is applicable primarily to startups, because when a vertical has two or more players that reach equilibrium, then the narrative falls to equilibrium and it becomes very hard to break out of that. An example would be Boeing and Airbus or Ford and GM. So depending on how big you open the iris, narrative command can take different forms. The obvious example for the last 10 years and currently waning is Tesla. In the United States, they have almost complete narrative command of EV and AV discourse. But outside the United States, that is not the case. And if you look at the global stage, you can see BYD is emerging as the narrative command player in many markets. Among tier ones, I think there's an equilibrium state. And it would take someone very disruptive to arrive and do something. The narrative command is applied to as a company in general, and everything they do then benefits from it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. No, I think that's very helpful. I mean, you mentioned BYD. Obviously that touches on tariffs. It touches on China. Obviously, inevitably. When you think about where the industry is at and the various challenges or trends that are at play, I mean, how do you see it evolving? Both domestically and internationally.
Very dangerous for the European and American OEMs. Very dangerous. The West's Europeans, Americans, I lived in Europe for many years, have had it maybe too good for too long. And it's to anyone who's been paying attention, not a surprise that the Chinese auto market is creating companies like BYD that are very dangerous for the long-term survival of most Western OEMs in their current form. So imagine a world where, developing markets want to buy EVs, and the best ones are Chinese. Like, what are the American OEMs going to do about it? Because they're not building. There's literally nothing right now that would compete with anything BYD is making in export markets. And it reminds me a bit of when I was a kid in the '70s, but I remember, that they at the time, Japanese cars were not considered great. And it took until the arrival of Lexus for them to reboot the narrative. And
Mhm.
now, it's a very, very strong player in the American market. I don't
Yep.
know what the Europeans are going to do, because they have not put up really any meaningful barriers to prevent the Chinese companies from destroying them in the EV market. And if you set aside just EVs and you consider driver assistance and autonomy,
Mhm.
uh, it looks even worse, because the only Western company that from the ground up was built to compete potentially with is Tesla.
Mhm.
One could look at Lucid and Rivian and say, oh, they're in this, they're right behind them, but that's it. And every other OEM is struggling to this day to come out with platforms, whether electrified and with any autonomy or great driver assistance, that are truly awesome. There are some rare exceptions, but not many.
So given that dominance by China, I mean, I guess what lessons should, the Western OEMs take away, or what's the best recipe for, accelerating, their competitiveness, would you say, when you look at
Well,
the landscape?
unfortunately, unfortunately, the auto industry, because it's very capital intensive and requires
Yeah.
long life cycles for development. I'm not gonna, it's never too late. However,
Yeah.
it is, it's very late in the game, and the solution is not something that OEMs can execute alone, because they require supply chains and relying on tier ones and tier twos that are all rooted in China. And so the supply chain must be must evolve before any of the Western OEMs can truly compete with more than a vehicle or two. Exception: Tesla, Rivian, Lucid. VW has an opportunity because of the Rivian partnership to
Mhm.
emerge stronger, but VW as a company does not generally move fast enough or boldly enough. And when they do, they usually make
Mm.
a suboptimal
Mhm.
decision. And I say this as a huge fan of Porsche, especially.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you spent some time at Argo AI, so you're obviously involved within the software side of the space as well. When you think about, OEMs in terms of where they put their software engineering efforts that'll yield the best bang for their buck, how do you think about that? Having been, in the belly of one of these beasts, and knowing how many resources they're throwing at this problem.
Well, um, I hope that the trend of OEMs pulling back from massive, robotaxi investments and then bringing development in house, Ford and GM are the best examples, will yield products that customers actually want to pay for, and that it goes beyond like an adequate driver assistance system that adds conveniences like hands-off features. Uh, it requires a radical rethink of what customers want and will pay for. And so I've not yet it's not yet it's not yet clear that customers appreciate or even recognize the benefits of the better driver assistance systems, Blue Cruise and Super Cruise, for example, the hands-off
Yep.
systems.
Yep.
But it is very clear that nobody likes camera-based driver monitoring systems that are too intrusive, whose boundaries are too tight. I've been looking for startups for 10 years that understand how to develop great DMS systems that are
Mhm.
truly, um, that truly, understand the boundaries and maybe the flexibility of the boundaries that allow a user to engage with the system that requires your DMS, which it will
Yeah.
be within a couple of years. And I have not seen a lot of imagination there. I see companies ticking boxes
Right.
and for product features, but
Yeah.
like a grand vision, like who's the Steve Jobs of
Yeah.
automotive. Who is
Yeah.
that person? I mean,
Yeah.
when people refer to Musk as that person, but he has taken the opposite tack by basically allowing a completely permissive DMS system to sit on top of Tesla Autopilot, which has led to many fatalities.
Mhm.
And so the grand vision of something truly fresh and new that customers will pay for is absent, except at Toyota. You know, Gil Pratt at Toyota Research Institute has shown concepts going back several years for an alternative form of driver assistance, which is very, very fascinating. And the Chinese, because they iterate so much faster, if anyone is going to deploy something like this, I hope it isn't them, but I think it will be. And then this is a bit of it's a Gordian knot because
Yeah.
product planners in the West need to consider what they can build on what timeline, what software they can fit in there on a different, often a high friction timeline, and then how long customers will wait and whether they're loyal to domestic or even Western brands. And
Mm.
the unknowns are enormous,
Mhm.
enormous.
So that being one of the, I guess, the Gordian knot in terms of that being one of the most challenging aspect of the space, right? What are those features that are gonna win over consumers, that are gonna, I guess, cause people to give up their hard-earned cash because they want this entire feature set, and I think the whole industry is struggling is what you're saying, right?
So if I were to start from scratch today and I was launching an automotive brand, software defined vehicle, electric platform, blue sky, whiteboard is clean. We can do anything we want with it. Think about what Musk did. He reset expectations and developed the seminal product in EVs globally, the Tesla Model S. And when we understood what it was as soon as you drove it. You understood exactly what he was doing and how great it was. So the next version of that, what is the next disruptive concept for a vehicle? Okay, it would be a software-defined vehicle that that has is capable of level 4 functionality, whether it's robotaxi or just mine to use inside a geofence. So if I
Mm.
go to a dealer, I look at the Monroney on the window. The Monroney has a map, the way cell phones used to be sold. The map shows like bright green areas where this car is level 4 capable. Outside, it's level 2 plus, whatever you want to call it. And then outside those L4 capable boundaries, it has literally the opposite of the driver assistance we have today. It's a
Yeah.
system that uses all the sensors and capabilities of the L4 functionality to help human drivers become better drivers. We can never close the gap and achieve ultimate safety with driver assistance. But if you improve drivers in real time, you build driver education into the car. You link it to insurance, but rather than a punitive insurance system, which you know uh, dings you for aggressive, harsh braking,
Mhm.
the car
Yep.
would know via the context of the sensors that you had braked because there was a child there. You'd in fact get a discount for that. So you would apply, AI with a DMS that understands that some people lean this way, some people lean that way, and you would train them and encourage them and give them carrots, not sticks, to allow insurance companies to interface with the car. And so this would solve, at least in the United States, the desire from one wing to make roads safer and the other wing to retain personal agency over vehicles you own. And obviously, it's electric. And there needs to be probably a better system of educating people as to the true cost of ownership per mile of privately owned vehicles, which we never really talk about. So if the next Steve Jobs of automotive needs to come out and say, here's what your car will be capable of doing in 10 years. It's going to be awesome. And today we offer one, two, three, next is four,
Mm.
five, six. And
Yeah.
there's no narrative leadership from any legacy OEM today. Like there's
Yeah.
literally zero.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we lack that visionary or whatever. And you mentioned Steve Jobs, and obviously recently the big announcement was Sam Altman's OpenAI, acquiring Johnny Ives's, AI companion startup. We don't really know what the two of them are developing, but I guess that maybe this is an opportune time to talk about whether part of that visionary long-term future, what does AI look like, whether it's the in-car experience or the development of and manufacturing of the cars themselves. Any thoughts around that as to, what that could look like or how you see
Well,
that technology playing a part?
I generally hate using the word AI. Try not to use it because it's so broad. It's like saying in
Yes.
1990, electricity. Like it's going to be great. It's going to be terrible. It's dangerous. It's going to be awesome. Um, but specifically, it's not apparent. Like when 10, 12 years ago, consultants and talking heads started saying, "Oh, case, connected,
Mm-mm.
autonomous, shared
Right.
electric is the future." Well, of course it is, but not necessarily all in one product. A
Sure.
lot of people don't want connectivity for their car, except for the GPS and map updating, and for updates to functionality. But even that, most people don't care. Autonomous, yes, people would prefer many people would prefer not to drive, but they also want to own the car and they don't want to share the car. And
Mhm.
does it have to be electric? Well, I believe that electric cars are better, but most people are not yet convinced. And in the current political climate in the United States, it's a problem. So if you deconstruct all these things and then you add like vehicles will have AI in it, what does it even mean? What people really care about is that friction is reduced in whatever they're doing. So basic things like knowing that the car should be pre-cooled and I don't have to open the app and do it before I leave the house or I leave my door. Pretty cool. The basic stuff. Knowing that I'm going to go to X, Y, and Z locations on certain days. That's a nice feature. Doesn't require a lot of intelligence to do that. Um, Diagnostics for vehicles and warnings. I mean, that's not that difficult. Tesla does it. Some other cars do it. So most of what people want does not require a high degree of artificial intelligence and already exists. But the packaging is generally not great and customer education is generally not great.
Yeah.
So I'm not convinced about any of that. Now, where I see an incredible application is the first time someone is driving their vehicle using like the Toyota style Guardian the parallel form of a driver assistance, something like that. And they're driving down the road and they encounter a crash. The AB can't stop in time. And the person jerks the wheel to avoid the impact and they turn it too far and they're about to hit a wall. And the vehicle has HD maps on board and they've been updated frequently by, via, fleet data, daily, hourly, who knows? And the vehicle allows them to turn around the crash, but does not allow them to hit the wall and turns back. This is the first time that is enabled in a car. The the driver of that car will be loyal to that brand for life,
Yeah.
even
Yep.
if another brand offers it. Doesn't matter. Just
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so we have a long road ahead of us. I'm super optimistic. If I sound pessimistic, I am not. We have a long road ahead of us to get to like this perfect world and the perfect car. Because for me, it's a Porsche 911 that's L4 capable in urban geofences, human driven outside, won't allow me to crash it, has real time insurance that variable based on how close I come to the boundary of the car's grip, and knows where I want to go on what days. If I pass out, it takes me home. All these things are inevitable, but it's not in the West beyond Tesla, Rivian, Lucid. It's not clear that there are aggressive focus leaders pushing the boundaries to get there. There's awesome stuff happening at at a functionality level, but
Mhm.
product and vision level, we're not seeing it.
Mm. Mm. Well, Porsche heard it here first. This is exactly what Alex wants, out of the next vehicle, so you've yeah, you've now got the laundry
But
list of what to take care of.
ironically, I wrote a column 8 years ago called The 2036 Porsche 911 First Drive, a science fiction spoof of car and driver reviews, where I kind of guessed on what a 2036 911 would have on board.
Yeah.
And one of the items, this would be a great feature, was a synthetic fake gearbox. So it's a shifter that is not linked to anything, but like an Airbus has a software envelope right underneath it. And then the outputs of the powertrain are controlled by it. And this would be a great product for Porsche, an amazing software-defined vehicle product for Porsche or any legacy manufacturer.
Mhm.
Because when people say they're all dead in the EV world, that's not true. Legacy brands have enormous value. They have a library and a history and a legacy of dozens of great cars people love that aren't made anymore. If you could buy a Porsche 911 today and subscribe like video game DLC to a specific year and package,
Yeah.
handling, sound, power, that can be replicated by via software in your 911 that's new. Amazing. And then the synthetic shifter would replicate the gearing of that old model, and the noise of the car could do the same. And that is something that no new company, no Chinese company could ever do, because those things are what make Porsche and Mercedes-Benz and Ford special. And irony of ironies, who was the first company to come out with, I guess, a half step towards this? Hyundai, the Ioniq 5N. They have the fake gears uh, as an option, and you go to the track and it makes a noise that resembles, gear shifts. Fascinating. And
Yeah.
Ford
Yeah.
just filed a patent for a synthetic gearbox. This should be Porsches. It's too bad.
Yeah, yeah. You make a great point around, like, you think about IP, and when you think about IP, it's usually technology, right? But you're right about the amount of incredible brands and models that over the course of the years, these legacy, OEMs have, that they could go back to that stable to introduce, time-tested favorite
And
features,
they
right?
will.
Yeah.
And they will.
Yeah.
In the future, once we have enough automation, a really high degree of automation in vehicle manufacturing, far beyond what we have today, cheaper, faster, we're going to see a resurgence. Every OEM is going to re-release their old they're going to release the old bodies
Yeah.
on top of EV software-defined platforms, with exactly what I just described. Because people
Yeah.
may want their cars to look old, but what they
Yeah.
want is not to ever crash, and they want to go fast.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, on that, I guess talking about ADAS and whatnot, we saw recently China obviously cracking down quite hard in terms of the terminology that their OEMs can use, whether it's ADAS or AVs, borrowing a bit of some of the language that the states has used. How do you see the regulatory space evolving, whether it's internationally or domestically? Any thoughts around where that's headed? And I guess, second two-part question. If you did have 30 seconds with Sean Duffy, Secretary of of Transportation, what would you advocate for the health or, betterment of the industry? Any thoughts?
Harmonize AV regulation across the United States now, right now, because beyond the criticality of automotive export markets to American OEMs and European OEMs, beyond that, is the absolute criticality that autonomy products are also exported. And the longer American or European companies need to fight, struggle, go through high friction, tunnels to deploy, to test and deploy and productize, the more time and ground is ceded to the Chinese.
Right.
Now,
Yeah.
the good news is that in the West, because we have a very high degree of scrutiny and transparency, both from a kind of populist and stakeholder side and from a regulatory side, that we basically know at least what the American systems can do. They're on the streets. I live in Arizona. I ride Waymos every day. I've ridden almost every AV that's currently on the street outside China. But what we don't know, what I suspect, is that the Chinese AVs are nowhere near as capable as what many fear. Uh, if they were, we would see them deployed outside China with some scale. We have not.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
we also know that it's very easy to conceal fatalities and crashes in a verticalized political system. So, and there have been many stories of crashes and several fatalities in China that were then scrubbed from the internet. So I suspect that there's a high degree of scrutiny from the Chinese government, but almost zero awareness, even inside China, of what their cars can and can't do. And that is where the clock isn't in the favor of the Western AV companies, but it certainly is probably paused, or if not, the threat is evolving much more slowly than on EV products. And so this, from a regulatory standpoint, this is I'd like to see the shackles taken off the American companies. And obviously in Europe, in Europe, it's much more difficult because the regulatory regime is much more complex. But at the same time, I think there's going to be much less demand for like fleet operated AVs in major European cities because of, well, primarily because of geography and the, strength of the transit systems.
Mm.
In
Yep.
the absence of transit systems, AVs are an obvious product, but with a strong transit system in a dense urban center, much less so. So it'll
Yeah.
happen. Just
Yeah.
the demand for it is much, much lower.
Perfect for Arizona, right? You guys are ripe for AVs, right?
Sadly, yes.
Yeah. Well,
I'm
I
a
mean,
bike advocate, really. So
well, like you said, I mean, it's a long road ahead for a lot of these topics and issues. I think the headline is Porsche's got 8 years to get you with the vehicle, the specific vehicle that you want to see. Always our final question, knowing what you know now, taking all the experiences you've had over the course of your career, what advice would you give to your younger self starting out in the industry?
Well, back then it would have been learn to code. Today that would be the same. But today would be, try everything. Like go use everything. How many? I mean, everyone's got good ideas, but few people actually execute. Go execute. Go do it at any age. Doesn't matter. For every generation that claims, oh, there's nothing, there's no opportunities. I'm bored. Yada yada. There's always a cohort of people who decide, but let's go. Let's just do it. And after Tesla, everyone's like, oh, how can an upstart make it? And yet there are new companies being started all the time.
Yeah.
I am a huge optimist, and the more pessimism I hear in the outside world, the more optimistic I am for companies that are really aggressive with great products and a vision they can articulate. That's narrative commander.
Right. I love it. Great advice. Get out there, go do something, try everything, right? You never know what you'll succeed in. So thank you, Alex. Really appreciate you making the time for us. And hopefully we'll be able to get you back on the show sometime soon.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.